and the two levels actually, and the other rooms and the streaming. So hi, everybody. So I would like to start by greeting the authorities and the colleagues and everybody in the room that has been possible, has made possible also this meeting today. And I also want to stress the fact that this is the 10th edition of the report, which is already a benchmark at different levels internationally. We do use it around when we just meet our partners and we talk about the capacities of Catalonia in this sector. And also, I would like to refer to some of the words that Minister Panet said this morning about distributed wealth and shared progress. And this is about Europe, and so this is probably, we will talk about that, the values, and if we are lagging behind, is this really something that we need to change completely, or how can we work about that? So this first panel will be about sharing these thoughts, these concerns, but also we would like to end with a positive note. Everything is ending with a positive note today, and I think this is very important. So I'm just going to ask a question to everybody. Have you lately heard about Draghi, Letta, Aitor, Compass? Does this ring a bell? I'm sure it does, because this is going to shape most of the policies or the impact that our sector will have in the future. So we're going to talk about a little bit about that, but also about other things. So to discuss about this, we have Aneta. She works translating global evidence into concrete policy recommendations, which is very good for today. We have Christopher. He has a broad vision, actually, on disruptive technologies and very insightful vision on disruptive technologies. And Joris focuses on unmet needs and the clinical path to patients, so how to bring innovation to those who need that. So it is an honor to moderate this panel. My role at Biocat is gathering information and some evidences also to also see which are the current and the future trends and challenges in our developments, and try to bring these learnings to our ecosystem and our organization to make it help transform our society. So this is what we are going to do today. We are going to talk about Europe, which is something that we have been discussing a lot these days, and we will be discussing later today for sure. But we want to analyze it like this, with a diagnosis, but also a call to action. We need solutions, and we need ideas to move forward, and we also need this positive note at the end. So I'm going to start with the three of you. I'm going to just share the first thought, which is in this life sciences and innovation sector, that we have a more competitive Europe really means a strategic independence, but also means a healthier global population, because innovation from Europe to the world. So in your case, EFPIA has been very active in pointing at the lagging competitiveness of Europe in the last years, but also at the growth of the pharma sector and the investment on the pharma sector. So in your perspective, talking about weaknesses, which are the main weaknesses in Europe, and which could be some of the solutions? We will see a lot of developments on that way. I mean, we have the Biotech Act, we have the Biotech and Biomanufacturing Hub in Europe, which are going to be some opportunities from there.
Thank you very much, Montse, and thank you very much for inviting me. I'm really delighted to be part of such a distinguished panel. And I wanted to firstly start by actually congratulating Biocat for launching such a report that clearly shows the multidimensional benefits of innovation. So not only the fact that it can make society healthier, live longer and better life, but also it creates jobs and supports our economy. That I only can say that also when we conducted our study mapping the ecosystem on clinical trials, Spain came up as a leader when it comes to clinical trials study in Europe, which only shows that definitely you are on the right path when it comes to setting the conditions for innovations. And what are these conditions could be? Well, that could be the capability of the healthcare system, that could be a good collaboration model between commercial and non-commercial, but also a good timely implementation of the clinical trials regulation. Nonetheless, I mean, we are Europe, we are 27 countries. We need to act together in order to truly exploit the potential coming from, greater use of the technologies and advancements in science and technology. So as Montserrat already alluded, Europe has put competitiveness at the core of its new mandate. And more specifically, the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, has said that the investment in research and development at the core of our economy. And here, from the perspective of the research-based industry, and we represent over 2,000 companies operating in Europe, companies of all sizes, we see the need to decrease the R&D investment gap between Europe and China. We are the sector that contributes more to the EU trade balance than any other. Hence, we need to start recognizing and addressing some of the challenges. And I will speak about the challenges in a second, is just to also show you where we now currently, namely the number speaks for itself. In Europe, we have currently 60,000 less clinical trials. Only 3 decades ago, half of the new treatments was originated in Europe. Now it's 1 in 5. It's the same when it comes to clinical trials for advanced therapies that shows the most promise to develop treatments for advanced cancers or genetic disorders. Hence, the moment is really to act now. And we as EFPIA, we've been vocal for years now that has to be recognized. Now, when it comes to sort of solutions that already, to some extent, has been recognized and outlined in high-profile reports of Draghi or Letta, and now are directly translated in the communication published by the European Commission last month on the competitiveness compass. So, first and foremost, and that won't be novelty to many of you, we have Europe has a great skills, has a great ideas, have a world-class academic institutions, has a pocket of brilliance, but our processes are slow and our legislative framework is complex. We need better coordination of the existing policies. We need smarter regulation. We need to challenge our highly heterogeneous approaches when it comes to dossier review, and that comes when it comes to the dossier review for regulatory decision-making, but also HTA decision-making. And we need greater investment in modern solutions, also in manufacturing, as well as agile processes at the regulatory level. So maybe I will stop here, but then I'm happy to elaborate during the next question.
Well, thank you, Aneta, because some of the things you were mentioning are going to be useful also to refer to Joris, for example. But we will talk a lot about the compass, or as much as we can, later, because of these 3 pillars. I will ask you to comment a little bit of some of the initiatives in each one of those. There's like the 3 main recommendations out of a Draghi report that is being reflected in the compass, and those are going to be very important for all of us. So that's interesting to talk about. But let me just go to Joris now. I will jump to Chris, leave you for the end.
Yeah, okay.
Hope you'll allow me that. So the same for Joris, but still talking about this lagging competitiveness, but in your perspective. And Aneta mentioned about the decrease in clinical trials, and precisely for advanced therapies, for example. So from your vision of the market that you have from EU and the US,
yes.
No? Some statements regarding this advancement to the health sector.
Okay.
What would you say?
Yeah, so especially focusing maybe on Europe and US, so around 50% of the company I support are in the US versus Europe. And it's true that I'm trying to be realistic here, but I'm super optimistic, I think, still for Europe. Because if you take kind of the different ingredients that are required for innovation, if we can use this word, I think one of the important things is healthcare systems. And yes, the US has a good healthcare system for the one that can afford it, but I think in Europe we really have the chance to have a broader access when it comes to patient access to different kind of therapies and innovation. So I think having an innovation system that can fuel an healthcare system that is in good health, to me, is a very, very good point. So on that element alone, I think you can compare US and Europe and really give maybe the favor to Europe. If you take something else, which is talent, academic centers, education, I think we really have something special in Europe. I'm kind of lacking the words to really explain what is that special thing and the ingredients. But I think versus the US, we really have an advantage to some extent. And again, without talent, I think none of the company can grow. So I think healthcare system plus talent is really something which I would say we have an advantage. Then maybe more conceptually, you could take into account the cultural differences, kind of the diversity of the different countries together, which makes it a little bit of unique when it comes to innovation, which is really something that you need. In the US, you could argue that you have two big poles, like the West Coast and the East Coast, but like beyond that, I think it's maybe more difficult for the US in general to have more diversity. So already I'm talking about three elements that are really in favor of Europe. Of course, we also need to be realistic on the things that we miss. One, I would say, would be the culture of risk, that still when you want to be an entrepreneur and you want to develop things that no one has done in the past, I think it's you need that, and I think in Europe we are a little bit shy. And the last point, which of course right now, again, the majority of my European clients are struggling with that, is funding. So funding right now, I would say, is blocked, or at least in the US is really advancing way faster than in Europe. And on that point alone, I think it really impacts negatively Europe. But again, you take those 5 ingredients and you now, maybe if you let me test an hypothesis, now if you're a company that can be transatlantic, and I can take the example of Alira, we grew thanks to a culture and mindset that is in the US, but then also workforce and people in Europe. So having this transatlantic view, to me, is really a very good thing, because now you can combine both advantages and weaknesses. So the transatlantic view will be something, for me, I would advise companies to think about.
Well, yeah, thank you, because you mentioned also some of the advantages, but also disadvantages that we have in Europe on that regard. For example, I think that we can just all agree that we have a skilled workforce and that we have the talent. But on the other side, you talked about the culture of risk at all levels, actually. I mean, not only at policymakers level, but also at all levels. So we have to change a little bit this mindset. We talked about the mindset in the video. I think this mindset is what should guide us on this, overcoming these barriers that were again mentioned by Draghi on an article a couple of days ago. So probably I will talk about that with Chris. But on this line, and talking about the differences with the US and China, and we were talking about that before. I mean, he loves because he knows what I'm going to say. I was really concerned when I saw the discussion between OpenAI and DeepSeek, talking about how did it really cost to train the AI instead of what we will be talking about, which is regulation, which is good, but not only about that. So I think this is something that we can talk about with Chris. But from your perspective on the technology side, we are lagging, and China is also surpassing. Which is the situation you see, and how these opportunities that we see ahead are going to help us.
Thank you, Montse, and again, thank you for being here and amazing report presented by Biocat this morning. China is a huge market. Europe is a big market, a little bit smaller. We're talking 1.3, 1.4 billion people versus 560 million. So I think we are still in a market-driven economy. So the opportunity that you have is going to be linked to that. And when we talk about opportunities and challenges, I think in Europe, I want to throw a spanner in the system for a second. We may actually have an opportunity from Donald Trump having made it to the White House, because with everything that is happening, I think we have no choice but to start to act like one. And I think this is something that has been lacking in Europe. It's that realization that this is actually a big continent, an important one, with all the wealth that has been explained. And we have to leverage this. So Draghi said that we have, barriers within Europe for goods that sum up to some 45% in tariffs. And I think on services or consultancies, you said it was about 110. we have to change. We have to change. The regulations don't help. I'm just going to touch, give you one figure on this. I was checking some reports. It takes 200 and something days for a new treatment to make it to market in Europe. It takes half of that time in the US. So all of these things mean that we are not leveraging the potential that we have. I always like to answer your questions, even if I start somewhere else.
I do know.
So regarding AI, I honestly believe that AI is one of these things that belong to everyone. And it can only work if it stays that way. Now, training models, you need two things. You need a good model, and you need access to data. This is pretty much available. So, okay, you need to put more chips to it. Who cares? Okay, if we can ensure that we have energy to power these chips, then we're going to be able to have them. So that's really not an issue. I don't think it's a problem that the US started and that China is catching up and probably will overcome the US. The opportunity is in actually how we use it. Using these technologies can give you an advantage. And right now, you see more and more people using AI, in their day-to-day activities. To write an email, to produce a summary of an article that you don't understand, to get some knowledge into something. So it is happening, which also means that the advantage you gain from it is going to be smaller and smaller the more people use it. Okay? Then you have the integration into some of the technologies that we have. And we deal with virtual humans, okay, or digital twins it's called, but you also have AI-based technologies for this. A lot of drug discovery is being done using AI today. The engines are public. You can reprogram it. Of course, it would be a bit annoying, but I don't think there's value to that. Again, it's how you use it, and then coming back to Europe, it's the framework that you put around it to be able to use it and exploit whatever comes out of it and transform that into value add. And I think that's what we have to focus on.
Okay, thank you for being so provocative. I mean, you're provoking a little bit a reflection here. I don't know how many people would agree with the idea that we get probably an advantage from Trump's, random occurrences, no? Yeah, so probably we wouldn't have this wake-up call with Biden, at this scale at least. So this is probably good for us, but you can answer to each other. I mean, probably you have an answer to that. You think that is also an opportunity, having Trump now putting all those random thoughts on the table?
I can try to maybe not answer, but comment. I think we always need to collaborate. So, I mean, I speak obviously from the perspective of the association that mainly operates at the European level, but certainly, especially when it comes to the new technologies such as artificial intelligence, we need to have, at least at the principal level, some sort of harmonized approach to set, for example, to definitions, what we understand by artificial intelligence, some high-level principles of how we manage, how we mitigate risks and maximize benefits. So I think, I mean, definitely we need to actually collaborate with all of the jurisdictions that now are on the top when it comes to the technological developments, and the US is obviously an important partner in that. I think Europe, in this perspective, is, especially when we speak about artificial intelligence, has set standards that might inspire other global regulatory frameworks. But here again, the question is to what extent these standards will actually support or stifle innovation, right? So I think we really need to, all the regions need to experiment together in a safe environment, for example, in sandboxes, where we can test these technologies in a safe space, and then agree on at least overarching principles. I'm not saying that we need to agree on everything, but I think if we're really about to explore the use of this technology in a safe and responsible manner, we need to collaborate. collaborate.
And actually, that the sandboxes you mentioned are actually some of the instruments that have been discussed in Draghi and in the Compass as well. Unless, I mean, we can just move forward, but keep that in mind for the last minute, because we want to go also to the Compass. These three pillars that are the main call to action in this Compass, it's closing the innovation gap with several initiatives that are going to be put in place in the next 5 years, for example, the startup scale-up strategy, the Innovation Act, for example, the AI factories. And then also you have the second pillar that is about decarbonization linked to competitiveness and the clean industries deal, for example. Or, for example, reducing dependencies. And that is very important because I'm going to ask you about strategic independence and what it means with the Critical Medicines Act, for example. So I'm going to ask Aneta, which ones would you choose as drivers to close the innovation gap? I will ask you for the first pillar. So this innovation gap, how we can close it? I mean, the pharma package is going to help, definitely, or the AI factories, you are working always in digital data? Mm-hmm.
Before I comment on some instruments that are listed in the competitiveness compass, I wanted also to focus on the actual coherent implementation of the newly adopted legislation. So I think this would be critical here. I am, as you can see, based on my title, I am specialized actually on digital technologies. So I mean, in that space particularly, in the last 4 years, we had a number of horizontal and sectoral proposals. The most relevant for healthcare is the European health data space. If that goes wrong, and there is a high chance that it might be, if the countries follow their own approaches and we actually create only maybe sort of a GDPR 2.0 instead of having a harmonized ecosystem for data sharing, that definitely would not attract and incentivize the investments, but also it would prevent us from exploiting the potential of that data to inform our decisions, but also to help us in training algorithms, etc. So this would be definitely a critical factor. So one thing is that we need to focus, instead of proposing new legislative proposals, we need to focus on implementing those that we have, avoid and map if there are any duplicative or even in worst cases conflicting requirements. Those of you that develop medical devices probably know very well what I'm talking about. So here we need to ensure the consistency between the medical devices regulation, between Artificial Intelligence Act, etc. So that's one thing. When it comes specific to the competitiveness compass, there is a number of instruments that are listed there that might help us in addressing some roadblocks that are preventing from increasing Europe attractiveness for innovation. We definitely see the opportunity in Biotech Act. The Commission has already said that they will try to address the current challenges with multi-country trials in Biotech Act and also in mock driving harmonization, the healthcare technology assessment. If that can be truly addressed via this mechanism, that would be fantastic. But there are obviously plenty of our instruments, and I think here it's again just to not make it too complicated and too complex, but to really identify those that are suitable to address specific obstacle.
And thank you for that, because that opens also the question to Joris about the strategic independency. So what does it mean to your strategic autonomy or technological independence? What does it mean to you? And is it about closing off?
So indeed, for me, it's not about closing off, it's not about limiting, it's about expanding, if I can use this concept. It's really about trying to leverage whatever you have, maybe versus the other countries, or looking at a fair analysis of what you have and you don't. You were mentioning about Trump and all that. I mean, if I conceptualize that, the way I see the US right now is really polarized, so really very drastic and different positions, almost black and white kind of thing. And you can take, masculinity, femininity, whatever, like everything opposes, where I think in Europe we have a much more nuanced way of treating things, which I think is an advantage in current environment. So that's one example of saying, you know what, I'm looking at what others are doing and I'm trying to maybe offer something different. So I truly believe that with that in mind, you can say, what do I have around me that is a plus, and expand, and use that to expand, and use that to create leaders that have roots in Europe, but also that are actually in the US, in China, or whatever. So much more than trying to say, okay, I'm going to try and close myself in a cage and trying to be comfortable in that cage. So, and I truly believe, again, with the diversity that we have in Europe, we are in a very, very good situation to do that.
Well, I think that we talked about, this shared, this collaboration, but then again, the need to flexibilize and simplify. It's also in the omnibus that is going to be presented in the next months, or developed, implemented. So, Chris, we will see several of these attempts to simplify, to flexibilize. It's not about closing off, but how does it translate when we have different countries, the fragmentation also among regions, and the regulation that is going to be, like Aneta said, implemented probably under different landscapes. So how do you see, how can we restart this innovation cycle in Europe? It's like something that is going to kick off.
Look, I believe both Aneta and Joris have actually, in a way, answered this question. Whatever you do, you need to act responsibly. Whatever you do, you need to do taking into account not only, your little bubble, but everybody else. And I think what we have to do is show the rest of the world that the regulations that we put in place, that the reflections that we make, actually guarantee the safeguard of all of us and are the best platform to deliver long-term sustainable growth. So we have to show this. We've been shying away from feeling proud to be European. If you look at all the political debates that are happening in lots of places in Europe at the moment, including Spain, you can start to argue that, what is immigration going to do, X, Y, Z. At the end of the day, the world is one, and people move, and you have to embrace these things. And if we have a model that has been probably, one of the most open models on the planet, and if we believe that this is actually the way forward, then we have to find a way to export this. So let's put in place regulations that enable to protect diversity. Let's put in place regulations that enable to guide the right science and doing it in the right way. The only thing I would say is let's try and do it a bit faster.
Yeah. So
I
think that, sure.
I just don't want us to put any more regulation. I just want us to implement those that exist.
That's actually the point.
Or implement them faster. I'll give you that. Let's implement them fast.
Chris, you say, let's talk about this regulation. And now we have 3 minutes, one for each of you. Draghi again last week talked about, we don't need to worry about EU, US barriers because EU, we put the barriers on our own. So we need a positive note to end. Joris, Chris, and Aneta, please, on positive note, 1 minute.
That was the easy one because I'm super positive maybe about Europe. But, so I'll try to be, again, I think you used that word, and it was in the video, again, mindset. And it may sound conceptual or not concrete enough, but I actually think it is. So it's a mindset to say the reason why, which is also something that we now, after COVID, can say. Before it was not. I actually want to live in Europe because I like the culture, I like the environment, I feel good, and so on. Those are things that you can use to then, at the corporate level, also give a culture that then gives you the energy, gives you the attraction, talent. Again, taking our company into account, we grew 10 times in 5 years. This would have not been possible without Europe. So I think this is really a mindset saying, I believe in that culture, I believe in this environment that promotes whatever I need to promote. And I think especially in the environment of innovation, it's really, really powerful. So again, it's a mindset to say, we're going to create locally, starting in Barcelona, an ecosystem that favors something. And I've seen in the last 6 years, I've been living in Barcelona, again, that thing evolving. So to me, it's really a mindset that you can apply. Again, the next minute we go out of this room. The
mindset, Chris.
Yeah, I'll really focus on the sector, on life sciences and health. I think all the data we can explore will tell us that we actually have the best healthcare in Europe. In terms of number of interventions and quality of interventions. Now, when I look at this and look to the future in digitization and everything, it also means that we probably have the highest quality data So that is something to look forward to. And that is something that we could bank on in the future.
Okay, I won't need to wrap up with that. So, and then, Aneta, your positive note.
Yes, well, thank you. So what I wanted to say that it really does matter where innovation happens. And that's really something that our politicians need to also realize, I think. So it does matter not only for the health of the society, but again for economic growth and resilience. And there are clear recognition of its importance in the competitiveness compass. We need simplification, we need better coordination, but we also need a sort of, whenever we propose any new legislation, we need this sort of competitiveness check of how workable, fit for purpose, and future-proof the proposed solutions could be. So we need a proper leadership, and those jurisdictions that will have the leadership, that will enhance the cutting-edge science, digital health, but as well will be able to build up a resilient supply chain by sort of diversification and limitation of any sort of critical materials, let's say, coming to Europe, would be those that would be able to flourish and eventually be at the top of the competitiveness race. We are definitely not there yet in Europe, but we have identified the right direction. So I really think that now we have a momentum and we need to act now together.
Thank you. The compass says, let's nurture and protect the EU values. I think we're doing this here, not leaving competitiveness out of the paper, but keeping this also in mind. So thank you very much for your insights. It was great to have you here. Thank you.